Good evening. Today is Sunday, June 28th, 2026. I'm Rich Stevens, and this is the Cold Take. What you're about to hear is news from the week ending June 26th, taken only from primary sources like press conferences and court documents. You can find those sources and attribution for every story at thecoldtake.com. We begin in Washington, D.C., where Tuesday, June 23rd, federal officials announced the 2026 National Healthcare Fraud Takedown. They charged 455 defendants in schemes involving more than $6.5 billion in alleged false claims. The Justice Department said the defendants include 90 doctors and other licensed medical professionals. The cases involve alleged fraud against Medicare, Medicaid, and other healthcare programs. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said the charges were brought or unsealed over a 14-day nationwide operation involving 57 U.S. attorneys' offices, 41 state attorneys general, 9 healthcare fraud strike forces, and multiple federal agencies. Officials highlighted wound graft schemes, Medicaid fraud, hospice fraud, cardiovascular testing schemes, controlled substance diversion, and transnational fraud networks. Blanche said one Arizona case involved more than $1 billion in alleged fraud tied to unnecessary wound grafts. Across wound care cases, 11 defendants were charged in connection with more than $2 billion in alleged fraud claims. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said the department is moving away from what he called a, quote, pay-and-chase model and toward a system designed to detect suspicious claims before taxpayer money leaves the Treasury. DEA said the takedown included 928 administrative actions tied to controlled substances. On Friday morning, June 19th, an NYPD emergency service unit detective was shot responding to a barricaded gunman in Brooklyn. Officers first responded around 5:45 a.m. after neighbors reported hearing multiple gunshots inside a brownstone on Kosciuszko Street. Officers heard additional gunfire after arriving, made entry, saw an armed man, and withdrew while specialized units responded. The man's wife and son escaped safely, but an elderly couple remained trapped upstairs. After more than 2 hours of failed negotiations, ESU officers entered the building. The suspect, 48-year-old Layman Simmons, refused repeated commands to drop his weapon and shot Detective Matthew Gale in the leg. At least 4 officers returned fire, killing Simmons. Police said Simmons fired about 20 rounds during the incident. 2 handguns were recovered, and the shooting was captured on body-worn cameras and police drones. Detective Gale, a 15-year veteran of the Emergency Service Unit, underwent treatment for a fractured tibia and was reported in stable condition. The accused killer of Charlie Kirk was back in court twice this week as the judge issued several major rulings ahead of next month's preliminary hearing. The judge denied the defense request to block prosecutors from using reliable hearsay evidence to establish probable cause. He ruled that Utah law allows it during a preliminary hearing because the hearing determines probable cause, not guilt or innocence. The judge also denied a defense request to force live testimony from an out-of-state witness who allegedly lived with the accused and was in a romantic relationship with him. According to the court, prosecutors instead plan to rely on the witness's recorded interview, electronic messages, a handwritten note, and other evidence. The court said the witness allegedly told investigators the accused confessed, concealed a weapon, disposed of clothing, and instructed him not to contact law enforcement. In a separate hearing, the judge found a Utah prosecutor in civil contempt for public comments about the strength of the state's case. The judge declined to remove the death penalty as a sanction, but ordered attorney's fees for the defense and said additional jury safeguards may be used to address any potential prejudice. The preliminary hearing is scheduled to begin July 6th, and if you subscribe, you'll get notified when we have updates on this case. Moving over to world news, on June 17th, the European Parliament approved new return rules for third country nationals staying illegally in the European Union. The rules require people with return decisions to cooperate with authorities and leave the country immediately or within a set time. They also allow detention after an individual assessment, including for people who refuse to cooperate, pose an absconding risk, or present a security risk. Detention can last up to 24 months, with possible extensions in some cases. The regulation also allows transfers to non-European Union, quote, return hubs if a third country agrees to accept them. Unaccompanied minors are excluded. Reporter Malik Osmani said, quote, people rightly expect that those with no right to stay return to their countries of origin. You know what? I am a United States citizen, and if I want to celebrate the 4th of July on June 28th, I will. You should hit like and subscribe. That's also free. Share this with your friends. Helps the channel grow. On June 22nd, a shooting in Montreal left 3 people dead. Montreal police identified the slain officer as 34-year-old Mohamed Lamine Benrendouane, who had served with the department since 2021. A Jewish civilian, Moshe Mizrahi, was shot by a responding police officer. Video shows one officer discharging a firearm, fatally striking both the suspect and the civilian. However, Canada being Canada is refusing to release any details on either the suspect or the officer involved. It's unknown whether the location is germane to the investigation, but it did happen outside the office of ILO, the parent company of Hub. As always, hit subscribe and you'll get updates if there are any in this case. On Friday, June 26th, Secretary of State Marco Rubio appeared with the Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors in Washington, D.C. for the signing of a trilateral framework agreement. Rubio called it, quote, the beginning of the beginning, and said it was the first step in a difficult process. Lebanon's ambassador said the framework is aimed at restoring Lebanese sovereignty and territorial integrity, securing a permanent cessation of hostilities, and allowing people to return to their land. Israel's ambassador called it a, quote, performance-based trilateral framework. He said the final destination is peace between Israel and Lebanon, with both countries living in security and having their sovereignty respected. He also said, quote, Iran is out, Hezbollah is out, and the road to peace between Israel and Lebanon is in. Earlier this week, Israeli government spokesman David Mincer said Israel would maintain full freedom of action in southern Lebanon and would not withdraw until Hezbollah is disarmed and southern Lebanon is demilitarized. Back to the U.S., but switching gears to politics, the Supreme Court ruled this week that the Trump administration may proceed with ending temporary protected status for Haiti and Syria while legal challenges continue. Temporary protected status, or TPS, allows eligible nationals of designated countries to remain in the United States and receive work authorization during the designation period. TPS is temporary and does not lead to permanent residence or any other immigration status. Haiti was first granted TPS on January 21, 2010, after the January 12th earthquake. The original eligibility required Haitian nationals to have continuously resided in the United States since January 12, 2010, and be continuously present since January 21st of that year. DHS later redesignated Haiti in 2021, 2023, and 2024, allowing newer arrivals to qualify. DHS terminated Haiti's TPS designation after reviewing country conditions and consulting with U.S. agencies. The department said Haiti no longer met the conditions for TPS and estimated that 353,000 Haitian nationals currently hold TPS. 5 Haitian TPS holders sued in Washington, D.C., and lower courts temporarily blocked the termination during the case. However, the Supreme Court said the TPS statute bars judicial review of non-constitutional claims about TPS decisions and said the Haiti equal protection claim was unlikely to succeed. The ruling does not decide whether TPS is good immigration policy. It decides whether lower courts could keep the terminations postponed during litigation. The Supreme Court said that they cannot. The Supreme Court also ruled this week that Mexico is not, in fact, part of the United States. More specifically, the court held that migrants waiting on the Mexican side of the border have not legally arrived in the United States and cannot force the government to begin the asylum process before they enter the country. A federal district court in California, later affirmed by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, ruled migrants waiting in Mexico could still invoke U.S. asylum law. The Supreme Court disagreed, holding that Congress tied asylum eligibility to physically arriving in the United States, not waiting across the border in Mexico. This ruling clarifies when the legal right to seek asylum begins. The Supreme Court handed down several other rulings this week as well. The court struck down Hawaii's law requiring licensed gun owners to obtain permission before carrying firearms onto private property open to the public, including places like stores and restaurants. It also upheld a Texas law requiring age verification for online porn, ruled that parents in Maryland may opt their children out of classroom lessons involving LGBTQ-themed storybooks on religious grounds, limited the use of nationwide injunctions issued by lower federal courts, and allowed a fuel storage project in Utah to move forward after narrowing the scope of federal environmental review. You can read each opinion along with a plain English breakdown and links to the court's rulings at thecoldtake.com. On Tuesday, June 23rd, Benjamin Hanil Song was sentenced to 100 years in prison for the July 4, 2025 attack at the Prairieland Detention Center in Alvarado, Texas. Song was convicted in March of attempted murder after opening fire on an Alvarado police officer during the attack, where he led members of the North Texas Antifa Cell. The attack resulted in charges including rioting, weapons and explosive offenses, material support to terrorists, obstruction, and attempted murder. 7 other defendants tied to the same case were also sentenced, with prison terms ranging from 30 to 70 years. Across the 8 defendants, the sentences totaled 450 years. On Thursday, June 25th, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis held a press conference announcing that Alligator Alcatraz now has 0 detainees and is being demobilized. He said the facility was built as a temporary emergency solution after DHS asked Florida for help with detention space and was used for almost 21,000 deportations. Critics have called the facility a failure and pointed to its cost, legal challenges, detention conditions, and environmental concerns. Florida contract records show tens of millions of dollars in active emergency immigration contracts, including more than $73 million for operational management, staffing, and more than $20 million for site feeding. DeSantis said Florida has already received part of its federal reimbursement and expects the rest. He also said the state expected the facility to operate for 6 to 12 months, and that's exactly what happened. Former detainees remain in federal custody, Florida's Baker County facility remains active, and the state's immigration enforcement work continues through 287G agreements. Welcome to the Cold Take Kindergarten. Today's episode is brought to you by Vocabulary. Temporary means something that lasts for a limited time and is not meant to be permanent. Join us next week where we talk about physics and how a person can't be in Mexico and concurrently have, quote, substantially arrived in the United States. Hit like and subscribe, share this with your friends, helps the channel grow. On Friday, June 26th, former National Security Advisor John Bolton pleaded guilty in federal court to willfully retaining national defense information. Under the plea agreement, Bolton agreed to pay a $2.25 million fine and faces up to 5 years in federal prison when he's sentenced on October 28th. Bolton served as National Security Advisor from April 2018 to September 2019. Prosecutors said he copied highly sensitive, classified information into personal, quote, diary entries about his official duties, including material classified up to top secret and sensitive compartmented information. He admitted sending the documents to 2 family members through non-government email and messaging accounts and keeping copies at his home in Bethesda, Maryland. One of his personal email accounts was later hacked by a cyber actor believed to be associated with Iran, but Bolton did not tell investigators the account contained national defense information. The guilty plea resolves all 18 counts from his October 2025 indictment. In financial news, on Monday, June 22nd, the 13th chair of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, passed away. He served on the Board of Governors from 1987 until 2006. Greenspan studied clarinet at Juilliard before getting his BA, MA, and PhD in economics from NYU. He was bestowed the title of Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 2002 by Queen Elizabeth, and in 2005 awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by George W. Bush. Alan Greenspan was 100 years old. Markets were mixed this week. The Dow Jones picked up 312 points, closing at 51,876, a 0.6% bump from last week. NASDAQ fell 4.6%, a 1,120-point loss that saw a closing value of 25,297 and erased gains all the way back to the 1st of May. The S&P 500 lost nearly 2%, dropping 146 points and closing at 7,354. Gold continued a 4-week slide, losing $90 in value, a 2% drop that saw futures close trading at $4,082 per ounce on Friday. And in sports, I've got a few stories from this week, but buckle up because the 4th of July is going to be busy for America's 250th birthday. F1 will kick off the morning with the British Grand Prix sprint race at 7 a.m. Eastern, followed by main event qualifying at 11. Wimbledon will likely be going all day, but it's too early to say who'll be playing. MLB has the Twins at the Yankees at 1:35. The Mets visit the Braves at 8:05 and the Brewers at Arizona at 9:40. You can also watch Men's World Cup soccer. 2 of the round of 16 games will be on at 1 and 5 Eastern. And don't forget the 2026 Nathan's Famous Hot Dog Eating Contest. Tune in at 12:30 Eastern to watch Joey Chestnut unhinge his jaw and eat around 70 hot dogs in 10 minutes. I like to have a few on the grill just to feel like I'm part of it. The 2026 World Cup group stage is almost complete, with just 3 groups still finishing play this weekend before the knockout round begins. The United States finished atop Group D despite a 3-2 loss to Turkey in its final match. The Americans opened with wins over Paraguay and Australia, giving them 6 points and first place on goal difference. Several round of 32 matchups are already set, including Brazil against Japan, Germany against Paraguay, and South Africa against Canada. The United States will face Bosnia on Wednesday, July 1st, with a place in the round of 16 on the line. That game will be broadcast at 8 p.m. Eastern from Levi's Stadium in San Francisco. Finally, in Major League Baseball, one name just keeps coming to the top. Jacob Misiorowski. Friday night against the Cubs, Miz tossed a 105.5-mile-per-hour fastball, breaking his own record again for the fastest pitch ever thrown by a starter. It was the 3rd fastest pitch since StatCast began tracking. Following Friday night's win, the 24-year-old rookie has an ERA of 1.45 through 16 games. That's 3rd in the last 50 years, behind Trevor Rogers' 1.43 from last year and Nolan Ryan's 1.29 in 1981. The Brewers won that contest 6-2 and sit 5.5 games atop the NL Central. Elsewhere, the Dodgers have an 8-game lead in the NL West, and the Braves have lost some ground but hold a 4-game lead in the NL East. In the American League, the Mariners are 1.5 games up on the A's in the West. The White Sox have a game on Cleveland in the Central, and the Yankees are just 1 game up on the Rays in the East. And like it or not, that's what happened. I'm Rich Stevens, and this has been The Cold Take.